When you think of the Middle Ages, what comes to mind? Knights in shining armor, grand castles, maybe a plague or two. While all that is part of the story, the medieval period, stretching roughly from the 5th to the 15th century, was also a time of incredible strangeness, fascinating customs, and downright bizarre events that you probably didn't learn about in history class. Today, we're diving deep into the weird and wonderful world of medieval history. So, grab your horned helmet. Just kidding. Vikings didn't actually wear those. And let's get started. First up, let's talk about something that sounds like it is straight out of a fantasy novel. Animal trials. That's right. In medieval Europe, animals could be taken to court, accused of crimes, and formally prosecuted. We're not talking about a farmer getting angry at a pig. We're talking about a full-blown legal process with lawyers, witnesses, and a judge. There are records of pigs being tried for injuring or even killing children, weevils being sued for destroying crops, and even a rooster being put on trial for the unnatural crime of laying an egg. The rooster was, sadly, found guilty and sentenced to be burned at the stake. These trials weren't just a joke. They were a serious reflection of the medieval belief that all of God's creation, including animals, was subject to divine and human law. It shows a completely different worldview, where the lines between human and animal responsibility were surprisingly blurry. Now, let's move from the courtroom to the dining table. Medieval feasts were legendary, but some of the dishes served would make even the most adventurous modern foodie's stomach turn. Forget your standard roast chicken. How about a cockantrice? This was a culinary monstrosity created by sewing the front half of a piglet onto the back half of a turkey, or vice versa, then roasting it. The goal was to create a mythical-looking beast to wow the guests. Another showstopper was the surprise pie, where live birds would be placed inside a giant pie crust. When the pie was cut open at the table, the birds would fly out, creating a spectacular, albeit messy, moment of entertainment for the diners. It was all about spectacle and showing off wealth. Forget taste. It was all about the grand medieval style. Speaking of style, let's talk fashion. You think today's trends are weird. In the 14th and 15th centuries, pointy shoes called poulains or krakows became all the rage among noblemen. And when I say pointy, I mean ridiculously long. The points could be so long, sometimes up to 2 feet, that they had to be stuffed with moss or wool to keep their shape. Some were even curled up and tied to the man's knee with a small chain just so he could walk without tripping. The length of your shoe tip was a status symbol. The longer the point, the more important and wealthy you were, since it showed you didn't need to do any manual labor. Eventually, laws were passed to regulate shoe length based on social class. Imagine getting a ticket for having shoes that were too pointy for your station in life. But life wasn't all fun, games, and pointy shoes. Medieval medicine was a terrifying field of trial and mostly error. Doctors operated on a theory of humorism, believing the body was filled with 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Sickness was thought to be caused by an imbalance of these humors. The solution? Often it was bloodletting. Leeches, or a sharp tool called a lancet, were used to drain excess blood, which, as you can imagine, often made the patient even weaker. Another popular cure-all was trepanning, the practice of drilling a hole into the human skull. This was done to release evil spirits, cure headaches, or treat mental illness. It's horrifying to think about, but what's truly astonishing is that some skeletal remains show evidence of healing around the hole, meaning some people actually survived this brutal procedure. Let's switch gears to something a little lighter: medieval entertainment. Besides the flying bird pies, people had some unique hobbies. One popular pastime, especially in England, was mob football. Forget the rules and regulations of modern soccer. This was a chaotic, violent game played between entire villages. The ball could be an inflated pig's bladder, and the goal was simply to get it to a designated spot in the opposing village, often miles away. There were virtually no rules. Pushing, shoving, and brawling were all part of the game. It was so violent and destructive that multiple kings tried to ban it, but its popularity endured for centuries. It was less of a sport and more of a socially sanctioned riot. Here's a fact that might change how you see those fairy tale castles. They weren't just beautiful stone fortresses. They were also incredibly smelly, dark, and cold. Without modern plumbing, sanitation was a major issue. Toilets, known as garderobes, were basically small rooms or ledges that jutted out from the castle wall with a hole in the floor that opened to the outside. Everything just dropped down into the moat below, or a cesspit at the base of the castle. You can only imagine the smell, especially in the summer. And those beautiful tapestries you see hanging on the walls in movies, they weren't just for decoration. They were a crucial form of insulation, helping to trap a little bit of heat from the fireplaces and keep out the bone-chilling drafts that whistled through the stone corridors. Let's end on a truly strange belief from the era: the vegetable lamb of Tartary. For centuries, Europeans believed in a legendary plant that grew in Central Asia. But this wasn't just any plant. It was said to grow a perfect, living lamb as its fruit. The lamb was attached to the plant by an umbilical cord-like stem and could graze on the grass around it. Once it had eaten all the grass within its reach, both the plant and the lamb would wither and die. This sounds completely made up, and it was, but it was taken seriously for a long time. The legend likely originated from early, garbled descriptions of the cotton plant, which was unknown in much of Europe. When people heard stories of a plant that produced wool, their imaginations ran wild, creating the bizarre and fascinating tale of a lamb-growing plant. The Middle Ages were so much more than the simple, grim caricature we often see. It was a time of immense creativity, strange beliefs, and fascinating customs that reveal a world both completely alien and strangely familiar to our own. From animal courtrooms and bird-filled pies to pointy shoes and lamb-bearing plants, it's a period of history that never ceases to surprise. What's the weirdest historical fact you know? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the bizarre side of medieval history. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more deep dives into the weird corners of the past, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay curious.